Hello and welcome back to Two Dark Dozes. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy dark doses of horror that hit you twice as hard, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. I need to tell you something that happened to me, and I know it is going to sound absolutely insane. If I saw someone else writing these words, I would probably scroll right past them and assume the person had lost their mind completely. But I am not crazy. At least I do not think I am. Something happened in my bathroom. Something that does not belong in the real world. And now my wife is gone. My reflection in the bathroom mirror stole her 3 days ago, and I have no idea how to get her back. Let me start from the beginning so you can understand how all of this unfolded. I had been on a weight loss journey for the past several months. It was going really well, actually. I had dropped about 30 pounds, and for the first time in a long time, I was starting to feel good about the way I looked. That particular evening, I was standing in the bathroom in front of the mirror, just taking a moment to appreciate the changes. My torso looked tighter, my shoulders looked broader, and I could actually see definition in places that used to be soft and shapeless. It felt good. I felt proud of myself, which is not something I get to feel very often. But there was something a little off about my face in the mirror. I noticed it, but did not think much of it at the time. The expression staring back at me was not quite right. It was not the face I was used to seeing. There was something almost judgmental about it, like the version of me in the glass was looking down on me, sizing me up with a kind of cold superiority that did not match what I was actually feeling. I remember thinking it was odd, but I chalked it up to the lighting or my own self-consciousness. We all have moments where we do not recognize ourselves in the mirror, right? It is just one of those weird little human things that happens from time to time. That is what I told myself. Just then, my wife came into the bathroom behind me. I saw her reflection appear over my shoulder. And a moment later, I felt her arms slide around my waist. She told me I looked good, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. She was proud of me, too. She started kissing the side of my neck, soft and slow, and her hands began to move, running gently up my thigh. She started guiding me toward the bedroom, pulling me along with that playful energy she gets sometimes, and I was more than happy to follow. But before I left the bathroom, I turned back to switch off the light. As I reached for the switch, I caught one last glance at the mirror. What I saw made every muscle in my body lock up. My reflection was screaming. Not just a surprised expression or a weird trick of the light. It was screaming with everything it had. Its mouth was stretched wide open, jaw practically unhinged, veins standing out on its neck. Its eyes were bulging and filled with this furious, desperate rage. And it was pounding on the glass, both fists slamming against the inside of the mirror like it was trapped behind a window and trying to break free. I could see the force of the blows, could see the way its hands flattened against the surface with each impact. But there was no sound. Not a whisper, not a vibration, nothing. Just this silent, violent tantrum happening inside my bathroom mirror while the real world stayed perfectly quiet around me. I closed my eyes hard and shook my head. One of those quick, sharp shakes you do when you think something is wrong with your brain and you just need to rattle things back into place. When I opened my eyes again, the reflection was normal. Just me, standing in the bathroom, hand on the light switch, looking a little pale and confused, but otherwise completely ordinary. I let out a nervous laugh. It was easy enough to explain away. My blood was not exactly flowing to my brain at that particular moment, if you know what I mean. My wife was waiting for me in the bedroom, and my body had other priorities, besides analyzing strange visual glitches in bathroom mirrors. I flipped the switch, turned off the light, and closed the bathroom door behind me. I did not think about it again until the next morning. I am one of those people who still shaves the old-fashioned way. I know most guys use electric razors or cartridge blades, but I have always preferred the traditional method. Scalding hot water in the sink, a good brush loaded up with shaving cream, and a straight razor. There is something meditative about it, the ritual of it, the precision it requires. That morning, I went through the whole routine like I always do. I lathered up, shaved carefully, rinsed the blade. Everything was normal. When I was finished, I leaned down over the sink to rinse the remaining cream off my face. The water was still hot, almost painfully so, filling the basin with thick clouds of steam. That is when something grabbed my head and slammed it down into the sink. It happened so fast that I did not even have time to react. 1 second I was leaning over the water, and the next my face was being shoved under the surface with tremendous force. Scalding water flooded into my eyes, my nose, my mouth. The pain was immediate and blinding. I tried to pull my head back up, but something was holding me down, pressing me into the basin with a strength that I could not fight against. The underside of the faucet smashed into the back of my skull, pinning me at an angle that made it impossible to get any leverage. The air that was left in my lungs escaped in a muffled, bubbling scream that went nowhere, just disappeared into the hot water like it had never existed. Panic does not even begin to describe what I felt. Every survival instinct in my body fired at once. I clawed blindly through the water with both hands, scraping the sides of the sink, knocking things over, until my fingers found the drain stopper. I grabbed it and yanked it free, and the water began to drain. Slowly at first, then faster, until my face broke the surface and I could finally breathe again. I staggered backward away from the sink, gasping and choking, water streaming down my face and chest. My skin felt like it was on fire. The burns were immediate, a raw, searing heat that covered my forehead, my cheeks, my eyelids. I gripped the edge of the counter to keep myself from falling over, and through the tears and the pain, I looked up at the mirror. It was fogged over from all the steam, covered in a thick layer of condensation. But through the haze, through the blurred and dripping surface, I could have sworn I saw my reflection smirking. Not my face, not the expression I was making, which was one of shock and agony and confusion. The thing in the mirror was smiling, a small, satisfied, knowing smile, like it was pleased with what had just happened, like it had enjoyed it. I reached for the cold water tap with shaking hands and splashed my face over and over, trying to cool the burns and clear my vision. When I looked back up at the mirror, the expression was gone. It was just me again, burned, scared, dripping wet, but just me. The smirk had vanished as quickly as it had appeared, and standing there alone in the bathroom, it was easy to tell myself that it had been my imagination, that the steam had distorted the reflection, that the trauma of nearly drowning in my own sink had caused me to see things that were not there. That is what I kept telling myself anyway, over and over, like a mantra, because the alternative was something I was not prepared to accept. But by that afternoon, I could not leave it alone. The question kept eating at me, gnawing at the back of my mind like a dog with a bone. I needed to know. I needed to prove to myself one way or the other whether what I had seen was real or just a product of stress and sleep deprivation, and burn nerve endings misfiring in my face. So I locked myself in the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror. The change was immediate. The reflection did not wait, did not ease into it, did not give me time to second-guess myself. The moment I made eye contact with it, its face twisted into an expression of pure, undiluted anger. It was furious. Its jaw was clenched, its brows drawn down so hard they nearly touched, its nostrils flared. And this time, there was no question about whether it was mirroring me or not, because my face was covered in red, blistered burns from that morning. The thing in the mirror did not have a single mark on it. Its skin was clean and smooth and uninjured. It was not my reflection. It was something else entirely. Something that looked like me but existed on its own terms, with its own expressions and its own agenda. Then it raised its hand and extended its middle finger straight at me. A clear, deliberate, unmistakable gesture of contempt. I stood there frozen, mouth hanging open, trying to process what I was seeing. The reflection started shouting at me, its mouth moving rapidly, forming words I could not hear. It was gesturing wildly with its hands, pointing at me, then at itself, then at something behind it that I could not make out. It looked like it wanted to fight. It looked like it wanted to come through the glass and tear me apart. And because I am an idiot, because my first instinct when someone challenges me has always been to challenge them right back, I raised my own middle finger and held it up to the mirror. I matched its energy. I gave it right back. That was a mistake. The reaction was instantaneous. Whatever anger had been on its face before was nothing compared to what came next. Its expression exploded into something beyond rage, something primal and uncontrollable. It started slamming its fists against the inside of the mirror with a ferocity that made the morning's pounding look gentle by comparison. Each blow landed harder than the last, and this time, the glass could not take it. A spiderweb of cracks erupted across the surface of the mirror with a sharp, sickening sound that echoed off the bathroom tiles. At the exact same moment, a bolt of pain shot through my right hand. I looked down and found that my hand was balled into a tight fist, my knuckles split open and bleeding. I did not remember throwing a punch. I did not remember deciding to hit the mirror. But the evidence was right there, blood dripping from my knuckles onto the bathroom floor, and when I looked back up at the glass, there was a bloody smear across the cracked surface where my fist had apparently made contact. The thing in the mirror slowly raised its hands, palms facing me. They were completely clean. No blood, no cuts, no damage at all. It had made me hit the mirror. It had used my own body against me, and it wanted me to know it. I do not remember making a conscious decision about what happened next. One moment I was standing there staring at my own bloodied reflection, and the next I was in the garage, grabbing a screwdriver and a wrench and anything else I could find. I came back to the bathroom and started removing the mirror from the wall. It was mounted with bolts, 4 of them, 1 in each corner, and I went after them with a frantic, desperate energy that left no room for hesitation. The reflection saw what I was doing, and for the first time, it looked scared. The anger drained from its face and was replaced by something I had not expected. Fear. It pressed its face against the glass, its features distorted by the cracks, and watched me with wide, panicked eyes as I worked on the bolts. It started hitting the glass again, but the blows were different now. Not aggressive, not threatening, desperate. It was trying to get my attention, trying to make me stop. But I was not stopping. I was done with this thing, done with the smirking and the silent screaming and the almost drowning in my own sink. The mirror was coming down. I removed the last bolt, and the mirror came free from the wall. It was heavier than I expected, and I had to grip it carefully to keep it from slipping out of my hands. Through the cracked glass, I could see the reflection one last time. It was screaming again, that same silent, wide-mouthed scream from the first night, but this time there was no anger in it, just terror, pure, helpless terror. I carried the mirror out of the bathroom, down the hall, through the kitchen, and out the back door. I walked it straight to the dumpster at the edge of the property and threw it in. The glass shattered on impact, breaking into 100 glittering pieces that scattered across the bottom of the bin. And just like that, the reflection was gone, broken into fragments too small to hold anything. For a few days, everything was normal. Blissfully, wonderfully normal. We did not have a mirror in the bathroom, which my wife was not happy about. She had to do her hair and makeup using a small compact, and she let me know on multiple occasions that it was not ideal. I kept putting off replacing it, making excuses, saying I had not found the right size, or that I was waiting for a sale, or that I just had not gotten around to it yet. The truth was that I was terrified. The thought of hanging another mirror in that bathroom made my stomach turn. But I could not exactly explain to my wife why I had taken the first one down. What was I supposed to say? That my reflection had tried to drown me? That it had given me the finger and made me punch the glass with my own hand? She would have had me committed. Anyone would have. Eventually, though, she wore me down. She has a way of doing that, a gentle persistence that makes it impossible to say no forever. So a couple of days ago, I went to the hardware store, bought a new mirror, and installed it in the bathroom. I was careful about it. I checked the glass from every angle before I hung it up, looking for any sign of anything abnormal. It was just a mirror. My reflection looked exactly the way it should, copying my every move in perfect synchronization. No strange expressions, no independent movement, no silent screaming. Just me. I let out a breath I did not realize I'd been holding and told myself it was over. Whatever had happened with the first mirror was a one-time thing, a fluke, a glitch in reality that had corrected itself. I almost believed it. This morning, after my workout, I found myself standing in front of the new mirror doing the exact same thing I'd been doing when all of this started, admiring my progress, looking at the way my body had changed, 30 pounds gone and counting. My torso was leaner, my arms more defined. I should have felt great, but there was a heaviness in my expression that had not been there before. Disappointment, maybe, exhaustion. The burns on my face had mostly healed, but there were still faint red marks that served as a constant reminder of what had happened. My face carried the weight of everything I had been through, and it showed. I heard the bathroom door open behind me, and I saw my wife's reflection appear in the mirror. She walked up behind me, just like before, and I watched in the glass as her arms slid around my waist. A moment later, I felt her touch, her hands on my stomach, her body pressing against my back. Her lips brushed the side of my neck, soft and warm, and I smiled. Despite everything, despite all the fear and the paranoia, and the burns and the sleepless nights, that simple touch made me feel safe. It made me feel like maybe things really were going to be okay. Then something shifted. Something in the air changed. Something I could feel but could not name. A wrongness that settled over the room like a change in pressure before a storm. I turned around. The bathroom was empty. There was no one behind me. My wife was not there. Her hands were not on my waist. Her lips were not on my neck. The doorway was open, and the hallway beyond it was quiet and still. My stomach dropped so hard and so fast that I thought I might be sick. I spun back toward the mirror, and what I saw broke something inside me that I do not think will ever be repaired. Inside the mirror, my wife was still there. She was still kissing my reflection, her arms still wrapped around its waist, her body still pressed against its back. And my reflection, the thing that wore my face, turned its head slightly and looked directly at me. Not at the mirror, not at its own image, but at me, the real me, standing on this side of the glass. And it smiled. A slow, deliberate, victorious smile that reached all the way to its eyes. The two of them began to turn away from the mirror, moving together toward the bathroom door, toward the bedroom. My reflection kept one arm around my wife's waist, guiding her, and she went willingly, happily, without any sign that she knew anything was wrong. She did not look at me. She did not seem to know I was there, standing on the other side of the glass, watching her walk away with something that was not me. I started screaming. I slammed my fists against the mirror, pounding on the glass with everything I had, yelling at them to stop, begging my wife to turn around to look at me, to see me. But the glass did not crack this time. It did not even shake. My fists bounced off the surface like I was hitting a wall of solid stone. The mirror was just a mirror now, at least from my side. Whatever power the reflection had, whatever ability it possessed to influence this world, it was using it in a different way now. My reflection reached back toward the bathroom. Not toward the mirror, toward the actual bathroom on its side. It reached for the door, and then it did something that I felt happen in the real world. The light switched off. The bathroom around me went dark, plunging me into blackness. Then I heard the door close. The real door. The door behind me on my side, swinging shut with a soft click that echoed through the dark bathroom like the period at the end of a sentence. I was alone, standing in the dark in my bathroom, staring at a mirror I could no longer see. That was 3 days ago. My wife is gone. Not missing in the traditional sense. Her car is still in the driveway. Her clothes are still in the closet. Her phone is still on the nightstand. But she is gone. She is not in this house. She is not anywhere that I can reach, not on this side of things. I have called her phone 100 times. It just rings and rings from the nightstand in our bedroom, the screen lighting up with my name over and over in the empty room. I have stood in front of that mirror more times than I can count over the past 3 days. Every single time, I see the same thing. My reflection going about its day. My reflection sitting on the couch. My reflection eating dinner. And my wife is there, with it, living her life like nothing has changed. Like the thing sitting across from her at the kitchen table is actually her husband, and not some impossible, parasitic copy that crawled out of a mirror and took his place. She looks happy. That is the worst part. She looks completely, genuinely happy, and she has no idea that anything is wrong. I do not know what to do. I do not know who to call or where to go or how to even begin explaining this to another human being. I do not know if the reflection can be stopped or if the mirror can be destroyed again, or if doing so would bring her back or just trap her somewhere I can never reach. I do not know anything anymore except that my wife is on the wrong side of the glass and I am standing here alone in the dark. And the reflection that stole her is living my life better than I ever did. I keep going back to that first night, that first moment when I saw it screaming behind the glass. I think it was trying to warn me, or maybe it was trying to scare me off, or maybe it was already angry, already plotting, already working on a plan to take everything from me. I do not know. I do not know what it wants, or what it is, or where it came from. All I know is that it is wearing my face, sleeping in my bed, and holding my wife, and there is nothing I can do about it except stand in front of this mirror and watch. If anyone has ever experienced anything like this, if anyone has any idea what I am dealing with or how to fix it, please tell me. I'm running out of time. I can feel it. Every time I look in the mirror, my reflection looks a little more solid, a little more real, and I look a little more faded, a little more transparent. I do not know what happens when the process is complete. I do not know what happens when I disappear entirely, and the reflection is all that is left. But I think it is happening soon, and I am terrified. Please, someone help me. I do not want to disappear. I do not want to become the thing behind the glass while something else lived my life. I just want my wife back. I just want to be real again. Story 2. I am probably about to confess to a crime. No, not just one crime. Several crimes. I should not be saying any of this, but I am going to say it anyway. There has to be some kind of record, some kind of testimony of what really happened. If I could go back and do things differently, I would. I would never have robbed that old man. I have always been a thief. For as long as I can remember, I have always been the kind of person who looks for the easiest way out of everything. Cutting corners was second nature to me. I was that kid in school who barely scraped by and never cared about any of it. I did not care about grades. I did not care about teachers. I did not care about what came next. And when school finally ended and I was free, I did not want a normal job. The idea of working 9 to 5 for someone else made me feel like I was suffocating. So instead, I started selling weed to make money. At the time, it was more than enough to support myself, and I stayed in that line of work for a while. It was easy money, and I did not have to answer to anyone. But eventually, I found something even more profitable: robbing old people. My friend Freddie and I got jobs working for a company that provided in-home assistance services for the elderly. The job was simple. We would go to their homes, deliver meals, help them with basic tasks they could no longer handle on their own. Things like putting away groceries, doing laundry, light cleaning. The old people paid the company for this service, and the company paid us a salary to do it. It was honest work on the surface, but Freddie and I turned it into something else entirely. While we were in their homes helping them with their daily needs, we were also figuring out where they kept their money. The system we had was smooth and efficient. While one of us kept the old person distracted by helping them with something, the other one would quietly search the house without drawing any attention. We had the whole thing planned out and running like a well-oiled machine. And when the old people eventually realized they had been robbed, they never suspected us. Not once. We were the nice young men who came by every couple of days to help them out for an hour. Some of them probably never even realized they had been robbed at all. Yeah, I know. How could I do something like that? I know that is what you are thinking. But in this world, you either eat or you get eaten. And I always preferred to be the one doing the eating, no matter the cost. To be honest, those old people had already lived their lives. They had already had their time to enjoy themselves. It was my turn now. What did they even need the money for? Most of them could barely get out of a chair. The way I saw it, that money was better off in my hands where it could actually be used and enjoyed. I know how that sounds. I know it makes me a terrible person. But I am not here to convince you I'm a good guy. I am here to tell you what happened. Everything went horribly wrong because of old man Jepson. While Freddie and I were providing our usual assistance services at his house, we found a small safe hidden inside his wardrobe. It was tucked away behind some old clothes and blankets, and the moment we spotted it, we knew. If there was money hidden anywhere in that house, it had to be in there. The safe was old, the kind with a mechanical combination dial on the front. But that did not stop us. If anything, it only made us more excited about cracking it open. Freddie and I had spent months studying how to open those kinds of safes. We had watched countless videos online, read guides, practiced on similar locks. It had become just another skill in our growing toolkit of petty crime. And when we finally felt confident enough to go through with it, we made our move. The day we decided to do it started out like any other visit to Old Man Jepson's house. I stayed downstairs putting away the food he had asked us to buy for him, while Freddie went upstairs to work on the safe. Old Man Jepson sat in his armchair in the living room watching television. He was around 80 years old and wore one of those breathing masks connected to an oxygen tank. He could barely walk. He could barely breathe without the machine doing half the work for him. I knew very little about the man other than the fact that he had fought in the Vietnam War and had neither a wife nor children. If I had wanted to know more about him, I could have asked. I am sure he would have talked my ear off just for the company. Old people are like that. They will tell you their entire life story if you give them even the smallest opening. But I never cared enough to ask. I did not care about him or his stories. I only wanted his money. I had just finished putting away the last of the groceries when Freddie came downstairs looking stressed. He pulled me aside and spoke in a low whisper. "We've got a problem, Vince. The old man only has a VHS tape in the safe." I stared at him, completely confused. What did he mean there was no money? Who keeps a safe in their house and does not put money in it? What? A VHS tape? I whispered back, still trying to process what he had just said. "Yeah," he replied, looking worried. "And I couldn't find money anywhere else either. We had spent so long preparing for this, and there was nothing valuable inside, just a VHS tape." But then I started thinking. If the tape was locked inside a safe, then it had to be worth something. Maybe it was some kind of rare recording, something a collector would pay good money for. Maybe we could sell it online. I was grasping at straws, and I knew it, but I was trying to stay optimistic. As they say, hope is the last thing to die. "Bring the tape anyway, and let's get out of here," I said, unable to hide my disappointment. I just wanted to be as far away from that place as possible. Freddie went back upstairs to grab the tape while I pretended to busy myself with something in the kitchen. I was furious. All that preparation, all those months of studying and practicing, and we had come away with a VHS tape. Who the hell did not keep money in a safe? Old Man Jepson had to have cash hidden somewhere in that house. But wherever it was beyond our reach. A few minutes later, Freddie came back down and gave me a quick nod to let me know he had it. We said goodbye to Old Man Jepson as casually as we could and walked out of that house. Luckily, he had been our last client of the day, because after that failure, I did not have the patience to visit another old person's home. The worst part was ending the day completely empty-handed. A few hours later, Freddie and I met up at my apartment. I had stopped by my mother's house on the way home to grab a VHS player so we could watch whatever was on the tape. Part of me was hoping it might be some rare movie or maybe an original recording of something hugely popular like Star Wars that could be worth a fortune to the right buyer. Freddie brought 2 six-packs of beer, and we started drinking before I even took the tape out of the bag. "That old bastard really screwed us over," I said, still irritated about the whole thing. "Let me see the tape." "Tell me about it," Freddie muttered as he handed it over. It looked like a completely normal VHS tape. The only thing different about it was that it was not labeled. Back in the day, VHS tapes usually had a white strip on the side where people would write down what was recorded on it so they could keep track of their collection. This one had nothing. It was completely black. No label, no writing, no markings of any kind. I could not stop wondering what could possibly be on this tape that was important enough for old man Jepson to keep it locked inside a safe. We were about to find out. I opened another beer and slid the tape into the player. The classic image of vertical colored bars appeared on the screen for about 3 seconds, and then footage of a forest came on. We were seeing the perspective of someone walking through the woods. It was nighttime, and the only light came from the camera itself, casting a harsh white glow on the trees and underbrush immediately ahead. It stayed like that for about a minute. Just someone walking through a dark forest with nothing but the sound of footsteps and leaves crunching. And then a woman tied to the trunk of a tree appeared in the frame. "Jesus Christ!" Freddie shouted, jolting backward in his seat. I did not say anything. I could not. I was just as horrified as he was. The woman tied to the tree was half naked. Her clothes were torn and hanging off her body in strips. She was covered in scratches and smeared with blood. She looked malnourished and severely dehydrated, like she had been out there for days. The camera moved closer to her, and we could see her wounds and the fragile state she was in with terrible clarity. I will admit that it was already getting hard to keep looking at the screen. Every instinct in my body was telling me to look away. But I kept watching despite how uncomfortable and sick it was making me feel. The camera pulled back from the woman and was placed on a nearby rock, positioned so it was pointing directly at her, tied to the tree. A few seconds later, the person who had been holding the camera the entire time stepped into the frame and stood facing it. "No fucking way," Freddie said in a voice that was barely above a whisper. He could not believe what he was seeing. "It's Jepson," I said, still in shock. I could not believe it either. Jepson stared directly into the camera as if he were checking to make sure it was positioned correctly. But the Jepson standing there in front of us on the screen was not the old Jepson we knew, the frail man who could barely walk and needed an oxygen tank just to breathe. This was a younger Jepson, about 30 years younger. He looked strong and healthy, nothing like the broken old man we visited every week. A cold feeling started creeping through my body. I did not like where this was going. I sensed Freddie felt the same way, but I did not even look at him. Both of our eyes were locked on the television screen. Jepson turned away from the camera and walked toward the motionless woman tied to the tree. He started sniffing her body the way an animal would, pressing his face close to her skin and inhaling deeply. Then he began licking her. He focused mainly on her wounds, dragging his tongue slowly across the cuts and gashes on her body. I was disgusted beyond words and terrified of what was coming next. Then, without any warning, Jepson sank his teeth into the woman's shoulder. Blood immediately started pouring from the wound. He tore a chunk of flesh out of her shoulder with his teeth, and when he pulled his head back, his entire mouth and chin were covered in bright red blood. And then something started happening that I cannot fully explain no matter how hard I try. Something came out of the woman. I could not tell exactly what it was. It was not blood. It was something else. It was like she was being drained of something invisible, and Jepson was receiving it. He started looking more alive with every passing second, more vibrant, more energized. Meanwhile, the woman shriveled up in front of our eyes. Her body seemed to collapse in on itself, the flesh disappearing, until she looked like a deflated doll, just skin stretched tight over bone with nothing in between. I was completely horrified. I had never seen anything like that before. not even in the most extreme horror movies. And the worst part, the thing that made my stomach churn and my hands shake, was that this was real. 100% real. This was not special effects or makeup or movie magic. This had actually happened to a real person. I wanted to throw up, but I managed to hold it in. Jepson walked toward the camera and stepped behind it. We could hear him rummaging around for something just out of frame. A moment later, he stepped back into view, carrying a small red canister. I recognized it immediately. It was a gasoline can. And I knew exactly what he was about to do with it. He walked slowly toward the woman, who was still tied to the tree, her shriveled remains hanging limply from the ropes, and he began pouring the gasoline over her body and the tree trunk. He was methodical about it, making sure the liquid covered everything thoroughly. When he finished, Jepson walked back toward the camera and picked it up. He carried it with him as he approached what remained of the woman one last time. When he was standing face to face with her, he stopped and just stayed there for a few seconds. It was as if he were savoring what he had done, admiring his work one last time before destroying the evidence. Since Jepson was holding the camera now, Freddie and I were seeing the woman from his perspective, up close and personal. We could clearly see what he had done to her. It looked as if all the flesh had been sucked out of her body, leaving behind nothing but paper-thin skin draped over a skeleton. It was one of the most horrible things I have ever seen in my life. That image would probably stay burned into my brain forever. Jepson reached into his pocket and pulled out a lighter. He flicked it once, and a small flame appeared. Then he tossed it at the base of the tree. The gasoline caught instantly. Within milliseconds, the tree erupted in flames, and within seconds, both the tree and what remained of the woman were completely engulfed in fire. Jepson took a small step back, but never turned the camera away. He kept it pointed directly at the flames, recording the entire thing. I have to admit, there was a kind of morbid beauty in that burning tree, the way the flames danced and licked at the dark sky above. But I could not appreciate it. I could not stop thinking about what had happened before the fire. I could not stop feeling disgusted and dirty because of what we had just witnessed. Jepson stood there watching the tree burn for a while. And then the image on the screen started filling with static. The picture froze. The tape had reached the end. Freddie and I sat there staring at that frozen final frame without saying a single word. We sat like that for several minutes. What we had just watched was beyond disturbing. It was traumatic. The worst part of it all was that the person who had done this was someone we saw and helped on a regular basis. Old man Jepson, the frail 80-year-old who could barely walk to the bathroom and needed a machine to help him breathe, had once gone around killing people and filming his bizarre murders. And he had kept the evidence locked inside a safe in his bedroom wardrobe. He considered that VHS tape his most valuable possession. That realization made me feel even more unsettled than the tape itself had. What the hell had we gotten ourselves into? That was all I could think before I finally broke the silence. "We have to put the tape back in the safe," I said. My voice was shaking. "We have to put it back like nothing ever happened." Freddie sat quietly for a moment, staring at the floor. Then he looked up with a different kind of expression on his face. Not fear. Something more calculated. "I've got a better idea," he said. "Why don't we blackmail the old bastard instead? Money in exchange for the tape." I have to say that Freddie was like a twin brother to me. That is why we got along so well and why we thought so much alike. We might have had different parents, but our personalities were almost identical in every way that mattered. The way we thought, the way we planned, the way we carried out our schemes. We were two of a kind. But for the first time in all the years I had known him, I did not like his idea. After watching that tape, I was scared of old man Jepson. Genuinely, deeply scared. No, we can't do that, I said, trying to convince him. Did you see what he did to that woman? Yeah, but he's old now, Freddie replied dismissively. It's different. Besides, he practically owes us money after this whole thing turned out to be a bust. Don't count me in on this one. If you want to blackmail that old man, go ahead. But leave me out of it, I said firmly. Come on, Vince. He's not going to do anything. Look at him. He can barely stand up. No, don't count me in. Freddie looked at me for a long moment and then shrugged. Okay, suit yourself. We'll do it your way then. No point in doing it alone. I was relieved that he let it go. Old man Jepson was clearly dangerous, far more dangerous than either of us had ever imagined, and getting involved in any kind of confrontation with him was a terrible idea. I intended to return the tape, never set foot in that house again, and never see old man Jepson for the rest of my life. I could not look at him the same way now that I knew what he was capable of. And honestly, after what I had seen on that tape, I felt like I would have to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. I genuinely believed he could come for me at any moment. The next day was normal on the surface, or at least it appeared normal to anyone looking at me from the outside. But inside, I was a complete wreck the entire time. I could not stop thinking about that tape. I could not stop replaying the images in my head. The woman tied to the tree, the way she shriveled up, the way Jepson had looked while it was happening. I barely slept that night because every time I closed my eyes, I saw that drained body hanging from the ropes. And underneath all of that, a growing anxiety was building every time I thought about the fact that we had to go back to his house the next day to return the tape. Part of me desperately wanted that day to arrive so I could get rid of the tape and be done with old man Jepson forever. Another part of me was absolutely terrified of seeing his face again. Then the day arrived. I could not think about anything else from the moment I woke up. I cannot speak for Freddie, but I think he was nervous too. I think that tape had affected him more than he was willing to show. Either way, there was no avoiding it. We had to return the tape no matter what. When we arrived at old man Jepson's house, we tried to act as normal as possible. We let ourselves in with the keys we'd been given. Old man Jepson was sitting in his armchair in the living room watching television, same as always. His breathing mask was on, and the oxygen tank hummed quietly beside him. Hello, Mr. Jepson. How are you today? I said with my usual smile, trying to keep my voice steady and casual. I know you two little shits stole my tape, he said immediately. He did not greet us. He did not ease into it. He just said it straight out, and his tone was unlike anything I had ever heard from him before. It was cold and sinister, completely devoid of the frailty I had always associated with him. I froze where I stood. My blood went cold. He knew. He already knew. It was the worst possible scenario playing out right in front of me. Mr. Jepson, there must be some misunderstand, I started, stumbling over my words, panic flooding my voice, but he cut me off before I could finish. Shut up. I know damn well it was you two who stole the tape. His voice was firm and threatening. Then he paused and smiled in a way that made my skin crawl. Now tell me, did you enjoy what you saw? That smile. I will never forget that smile. I regretted stealing that tape more than I had ever regretted anything in my entire life. If only I could go back and undo it all. But it was already too late for that. Freddie pulled the tape out of the small bag he was carrying and stepped toward old man Jepson. He walked right up to him, standing over him while Jepson remained seated in his armchair. Freddie's face was hard and irritated, and when he spoke, there was no trace of nerves in his voice, just pure, cold confidence. "You want your tape back, you sick old man? Then you're going to have to pay up first. $10,000 cash for the tape. Otherwise, I'm handing this thing over to the police." Old man Jepson burst out laughing. It was a harsh and wheezing laugh that rattled through the breathing mask, but there was nothing weak about it. "Then hand it over to the police," he said with a sarcastic edge in his voice. "And when they ask how the tape ended up in your possession, what are you going to tell them? That it fell from the sky? Or that you stole it?" This blackmail move Freddie had pulled at the last second was an act of desperation. I admired his courage, I really did. But old man Jepson did not look intimidated, not even slightly. And that was a very bad sign. Freddie grabbed old man Jepson by the collar of his shirt and yanked his face close. Their faces were less than a foot apart. "Listen to me, you old piece of shit," Freddie said, his voice tight with anger. "I don't care if I stole the tape and the police find out. They'll see what kind of sick things you've done, and it'll be over for you. If you don't give us the money, I swear I'll..." He never finished that sentence. Old man Jepson lunged forward with a speed that should have been impossible for a man his age and sank his teeth into Freddie's nose. It caught me completely off guard. I stood there frozen, unable to move, unable to speak, while it happened right in front of me. Old man Jepson had his teeth clamped down on Freddie's nose. Blood sprayed across both of their faces and poured down onto the floor. Freddie screamed in agony, a raw and desperate sound that I had never heard come out of another human being before. Then Jepson ripped Freddie's nose clean off his face. Even more blood gushed from the wound, and Freddie's scream turned into something guttural and barely human. And then I watched the same thing happen that I had seen on the tape. Something came out of Freddie. I could not see it, but I could feel it happening. It was like the life was being pulled out of him, and old man Jepson was absorbing every bit of it. Freddie's body started collapsing, the skin tightening, the flesh disappearing, until he dropped to the floor completely shriveled up, just skin and bones. He looked exactly like the woman on the tape, like a deflated doll. Old man Jepson looked different now. He looked slightly younger than he had just 5 minutes earlier. It was subtle, but unmistakable. It was as if he had just reclaimed another 5 years of life from my best friend's body. He turned his gaze toward me. His face was completely covered in blood. His eyes seemed to glow with a faint yellow light that should not have been there, and he smiled that horrible smile again. "You're next," he said. Pure adrenaline exploded through my body. I did not think. I did not plan. In the grip of total panic, the moment those words left his mouth, I turned and ran for the stairs that led up to his bedroom. That was the problem. I should have run straight out the front door. The exit was right there. But I did not make that choice. It was an impulse decision, the kind you make when your brain is drowning in desperation and fear and stress, and you do not have the luxury of thinking anything through. I took the stairs 2 at a time, moving faster than I had ever moved in my life. It felt like I had chugged 3 cans of energy drink all at once. I burst into his bedroom and slammed the door shut behind me. Without wasting a single second, I started shoving every piece of furniture in the room in front of the door. The dresser, the nightstand, the small bookshelf, anything I could get my hands on. I piled it all up against that door like my life depended on it, because it did. It was not long before old man Jepson reached the bedroom door. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, slower than mine but steady and deliberate. He tried the handle. It would not budge. Then he started slamming his fists against the wood like a madman. The door shook with each blow, and the sound echoed through the small room like a drum. "You think you can escape me?" he screamed from the other side. "Don't forget, you're the one trapped in here with me, not the other way around." "Go to hell, you sick old man," I shouted back. Another impulse. Another reaction I could not control. I managed to live for more than 200 years without anyone ever discovering me, he screamed. And now there was a new quality to his voice, a kind of unhinged madness that made every hair on my body stand up. "And you think some sewer rat like you is going to bring me down? I drained your friend's soul and his life force, and sooner or later you'll be next. It's only a matter of time." I did not respond. I pressed my back against the pile of furniture and stayed perfectly still, barely breathing, trying to make as little noise as possible. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. "You're going to be the last person whose life force I drain," he said, his voice dropping slightly, sounding almost tired now, but still full of venom. "And then I'll finally be able to die in peace." That last part hit me differently. It carried a weight that cut through my panic for just a moment. That was when the pieces started coming together in my head. Somehow, old man Jepson drained the life force out of people to sustain his own life. He absorbed their years and added them to his own. That was how he had lived for over 200 years. But he was tired of it. He wanted to die. He wanted it to end naturally. He was ready to let go. But Freddie and I had stolen his tape and confronted him, and now he had been forced to drain Freddie just to protect himself. We had disrupted whatever plan he had for his final days. That tape had been his souvenir, a memento of his dark and bloody past. Something he could watch and relive whenever he wanted to remember what he had done and what he had been. Maybe it excited him. Maybe it was the only thing left that made him feel anything at all. I did not know for sure. That was just a theory. The only thing I knew with absolute certainty was that he had killed many more people than just the woman on the tape, and I had no idea how many. He was essentially a serial killer, and the most successful one in the history of the world. No one had ever discovered what he was, not in over 200 years of existence. No one except Freddie and me. And we had only stumbled onto his secret by accident. I did not even know if he was human. I did not know if he was some kind of supernatural creature that fed on human life force to extend its own existence. But none of that mattered right now. The only thing that mattered was getting out of that room alive. And I still had no idea how I was going to do it. That is why I'm writing this right now, hiding in old man Jepson's bedroom while he tries to force his way through the door. I can hear him out there. He has stopped banging with his fists. Now I can hear him rummaging around, grabbing tools and heavy objects. He is going to try to break the door down. Sooner or later, he is going to get through. The furniture will not hold forever. I already called 911. I was barely able to get the words out, but I gave them the address and told them I needed help immediately. It is the only way I am getting out of here alive. Now all that is left to do is wait for the police to arrive and pray that they do not get here too late. Story 3. The quarry sat about 8 miles outside our tiny town of Winona. If you were fast and your legs were fresh, you could make it there in about 45 minutes on a bike. 45 minutes of pedaling, and then another 15 on a narrow, forgotten trail that cut through old-growth forest, so thick the sunlight barely reached the ground. 1 hour of your time and energy, and you were transported back centuries to a place completely untouched by the modern world. No power lines, no pavement, no signs, no trash cans, nothing. Just ancient trees, mossy rock, and that massive hole in the earth filled with the strangest, most beautiful water you had ever seen. The quarry was where we spent nearly every day of summer when we were kids, and for a while it felt like the only place on earth that truly mattered. Kathy rode out there on a rusty old bike she had long outgrown. It was the same bike she first learned to ride on, back when she was maybe 5 or 6. Her father, who was a loud and impatient man, had ripped the training wheels off one afternoon in a hurry, and from that day forward the bike just sort of stayed the same. It never got upgraded or replaced. The frame was too small for her. Her knees stuck out at weird angles when she pedaled, and there were these old matted bike streamers still dangling from the handlebars, faded pink and tangled with dirt. We called her Bike Sissy Shit. She hated that name, and honestly so did we, but it stuck the way cruel nicknames do when you are young and not yet aware of how words can bruise. Jeff took his older brother's Schwinn everywhere he went. It was a real bike, the kind with working gears and a proper frame and everything you could want. It was painted a deep forest green that looked sharp even after years of use. The only problem was the chain, which had this annoying habit of popping off at the worst possible moments. You would be flying downhill feeling like a god, and then the pedals would go slack and the chain would be dragging on the ground behind you. Still, that bike was a beautiful ride, and the green color made it easy to hide in bushes when we got to the quarry, which mattered because none of us wanted our bike stolen, even though there was probably nobody around for miles. Bo rode one of those BMX bikes with the metal pegs sticking out from the center of each wheel, the kind of bike that was made for doing tricks and jumps and looking cool at skate parks. The funny thing about that was Bo was too much of a marshmallow to actually try any tricks on it. He would not even stand on those pegs when coasting down a smooth, flat road. The pegs were purely decorative as far as Bo was concerned. He read too many books and worried about too many things to ever take a risk like that. He was the cautious one, the careful one, and we loved him for it even when it drove us crazy. I had a dark blue Huffy with faded flame decals painted on the sides. The flames had probably looked cool once, maybe in a store window under fluorescent lights. But by the time I owned the thing, they were chipped and peeling and barely visible. My bike did not have the regular handlebar brakes that most bikes had. Instead, you had to pedal backward to stop, which meant you were always a half second behind on your braking and always skidding a little further than you wanted to. The kickstand was broken too, so every time I parked the thing, I had to lean it against a tree or a wall or just let it fall over in the dirt. And when you first took off on it, the whole frame would jerk and stutter like it was having a seizure until you built up enough speed for everything to smooth out. It was not a great bike by any measure, but it was a bike, and I suppose that was all I really needed. The quarry itself sat in a deep pocket of old-growth forest, and nobody in town really knew much about it. All of our parents and the older folks in Winona seemed to agree that the quarry was already there when the town was founded way back in the early 1800s. Nobody could say who had dug it or why or when it was abandoned. It was just there, like some ancient wound in the earth that the forest had slowly grown around and swallowed up. It was a great big hole in the world, and over who knows how many decades or centuries, the quarry had filled with the water. The water was this enchanting shade of blue, not quite turquoise and not quite navy, something in between that shifted depending on the light. And it was always the perfect temperature, cool enough to feel refreshing when you jumped in, but never so cold that it shocked you. There were cliffs around the north side, tall, rugged walls of rock that jutted out over the water, and you could throw yourself off those cliffs all day and all night without ever having to worry about hitting a random rock or scraping the bottom. The depth of that water was unknown. The cliff face continued straight down beneath the surface and just kept going until it vanished into blackness. It could have been 100 feet deep, or it could have been 1,000, and Lord knows we tried to figure it out. We would throw things into the quarry, just about anything we could get our hands on. Bo would bring loose change from his piggy bank, handfuls of pennies and nickels and dimes that caught the sunlight as they tumbled through the air. We probably dropped $50 worth of coins into that water over the course of a single summer, just trying to see if we could watch them hit the bottom. Kathy would bring swim goggles, and Jeff and I would take turns diving down as deep as we could, chasing the sinking coins with our eyes, trying to follow them into the dark. I still remember the feeling of those dives, that tremendous pressure that wrapped around your head like a vice and made it feel like your skull would crack open if you did not float back up soon. The temperature of the water would plummet the deeper you went, dropping so fast it felt like crossing some invisible boundary between the living world and something else. The cold would coat your entire body in what I can only describe as a silky suit of ice, pressing against every inch of your skin. And then came the dark. All that godlike power the sun poured down on the surface was not enough to penetrate more than 20 feet of that quarry's thick, syrupy water. Below that depth, everything went dark in a way that felt personal, like the darkness was aware of you and had been waiting. That is where I always paused. The pressure would be nearly unbearable by that point, my lungs screaming, my ears ringing. And I would just hang there, in the cold, dark depth for a few extra seconds, and watch the coin I had been chasing fall lower and lower, tumbling end over end until it too sank beyond the reach of the sun's warm rays and disappeared. Gone. Swallowed by something I could not see and would never understand. And then I would shoot back up toward the surface as fast as my body could carry me, always with this awful crawling feeling on my legs, always certain that something was about to rise from the dark and snatch my ankle and pull me back down. A few seconds in that murk was all it took to transport a kid into another world entirely, one even further removed from reality than the ancient forest that surrounded it. The quarry was a mysterious place, and it comes as no surprise that nearly every kid who ever lived in Winona went through their own phase of journeying out to that forgotten spot. Winona itself was a tiny little town strangely positioned in the middle of a vast sea of forest. There was never much to do. The nearest real city was hours away. We had no movie theater, no arcade, no mall, nothing. The quarry was not only our swimming hole, but also the place where older kids went to be alone with each other, the spot where teenagers smoked their first cigarettes, the hidden stage for every kind of adolescent sin you could imagine. It was where you went when you wanted to feel like you had escaped the world, even if only for an afternoon. All of this happened during the summer between 8th and 9th grade. That was the summer Kathy, Jeff, Bo, and I lived out our quarry phase in full. Every single day we had some scheme or some new adventure to get into out there. One day it would be cliff jumping, hurling ourselves off the rocks with our arms spread wide, screaming until the water swallowed the sound. The next day it would be fishing, sitting on the warm ledges with stolen line and bent hooks, catching nothing and not caring. Then we would be smoking cigarettes that Jeff had stolen from his brother's stash, coughing our lungs out and pretending to enjoy it. Then we were setting off firecrackers and watching them echo across the quarry like tiny thunderclaps. Then we tried rock climbing on the steep cliffs we had grown tired of jumping from, scraping our knees and elbows on the rough stone. After that became boring, we would survey all the trails around the quarry and try to find something new, some hidden cave or old carving or animal den that we had not noticed before. It did not take long for 4 restless teenagers to wear out that entire area. We were still young enough to be genuinely adventurous and just square enough to not indulge in the heavier pastimes, like smoking Jeff's brother Terry's skunkweed, which smelled like a dead animal and it looked like lawn clippings. We had barely broken into July when we all started going out to the quarry at night. Sneaking out of our houses and making the hour-long commute in the dark was exactly the kind of thrill our prepubescent heads were chasing. Leaving my house was easy because my mom slept like the dead and my dad worked the night shift. Jeff had no trouble at all because his parents could not have cared less where he was or what he was doing at any given hour. Kathy and Bo, however, had to pull off elaborate stunts to get out of their houses without getting caught. Climbing out windows and down trees, memorizing which floorboards squeaked and which ones were safe to step on, timing their exits to the rhythm of a sleeping parent's breathing. Real cat burglar stuff that would have been impressive if it was not also kind of sad. Winona was a strange place at night. It got so dark on some evenings that you could look up and make out the faint, milky clouds of our galaxy stretched across the sky. The town had almost no streetlights, and once the houses went dark, there was nothing between you and the forest but your own heartbeat. You would hear the strangest sounds spilling from the black wall of trees on either side of the road, sounds that did not belong to any animal you could name. And you would just grip your handlebars a little tighter and roll your bike on by as quietly as you could. Those night rides out to the quarry were long and absolutely drenched in paranoia. The forgotten trail was the worst part because you had to get off your bike and walk it, which meant moving slowly and getting uncomfortably intimate with the dark forest and every unnatural noise it produced. Some nights Jeff would hide behind a tree or a rock and jump out at me as I passed, sending me into a full-blown fight or flight response that left me shaking and furious. He was a real jackass sometimes, just like his older brother Terry. Terry was the one who told us about the licking thing. We were all standing around a raging trash fire in Jeff and Terry's backyard. Their family did a big burn every month, hauling out bags of garbage and old junk and tossing it all into a pit in the yard. Terry was tending the fire that night, poking at it with a stick, and he had clearly been smoking because his eyes were red and half shut, and his voice had dropped into that low, creaking tone he always got after ripping his sticker-covered bong. "You guys are too chicken shit to try this," Terry said, staring into the fire. "But if you want to experience something that'll really mess you up, like seriously stick with you for the rest of your lives, you should meet the licking thing." We all just looked at him. Terry took another hit and kept going. "It's the craziest thing you'll ever do. I did it when I was about your age." "What the hell are you talking about, Terry?" Jeff asked. "You've literally never said a single word about any licking thing before." Jeff said the words "licking thing" in a high, mocking voice, like he was doing an impression of a cartoon character. "He's just trying to scare us," Kathy said, sounding bored. She was messing with her frizzy hair, pulling at the ends, and not even looking at Terry. "You're going to have to come up with something more creative than licking thing," I added. "Yeah, like what is it, a dog?" Jeff said, and then his voice dropped lower. "Terry, have you been doing the peanut butter trick again with the neighbor's poodle?" Terry punched Jeff hard in the chest, and Jeff sent a harder one right back, nearly knocking the bong out of Terry's hands. Terry straightened up and raised his fist, in that classic older brother hammer strike that he had been using to terrorize Jeff since they were little. Jeff flinched and ducked. "You flinched, pussy," Terry barked. "Guys," Kathy screeched. "You two are unbelievable." "For what it's worth," Bo said carefully, stepping in with his usual diplomatic tone. "I think the licking thing sounds pretty messed up." That was Bo, always trying to smooth things over, always terrified of hurt feelings and raised voices. He was the embodiment of neutrality. "Thanks, Switzerland," Terry said. "Look, you guys don't believe me? That's fine. Try for yourselves. You'll see. Next time you have one of your little late-night play dates at the quarry, take a dip." "We've swum all over the quarry," I said. "What's your point?" "No. You got to do it late at night. Swim out into the center of the quarry and wait." "You're so stupid, dude," Jeff muttered, rubbing his chest where Terry had hit him. "What's so special about swimming out to the middle?" I asked, pushing further. Part of me expected this to be total nonsense, but another part of me thought, what if it is cool nonsense? "What if one of us gets a cramp and can't swim back?" Bo asked, looking around at the rest of us like he expected everyone to agree with him. There was a moment of communal secondhand embarrassment at that. Terry just stared at him. "Then you'll drown and they'll never find your body." "Duh." "We just won't eat beforehand, Bo," Kathy said in a tone that sounded like a disappointed mother. "So we swim out to the center and do it late at night," Jeff said, puffing his chest out. "Simple. I'll do you one better and do it during the witching hour." "Sure. I don't care when you do it," Terry said, and took another massive hit from his bong. "Do exactly that and give it a few minutes. Watch what happens." He exhaled a thick cloud and looked at us through it. "But you won't do it. You're all too chicken shit." That was all the motivation we needed. 2 words: chicken shit. We would all go to the quarry the very next night with our swim gear. I would be lying if I said I was not getting those nervously excited electric jolts throughout the entire next day. My mind was on fire, with conflicting thoughts and feelings about what we were going to do that night. One part of me kept asking what the licking thing even was, what Terry could possibly have been talking about. Why swimming to the center of the quarry at night would be any different from swimming there during the day. Another part of me kept answering that Terry was just messing with us, that nothing was going to happen, that this was all just some stupid prank designed to scare a bunch of younger kids, because that was the only joy Terry got out of his miserable life. But then another voice in my head would push back and say that Terry had never really gone out of his way to scare us before. He was not that kind of guy. He was lazy and stoned most of the time, and he barely talked unless he was really high, which meant whatever he had told us the night before had come from a place of genuine openness. Maybe the weed had loosened something in him. Maybe he had been sitting on this for years, and it finally came out. The thoughts kept going around and around in circles all day long, and I could not make them stop. As the sun crept below the tree line and stars started appearing in the evening sky, I began to feel that twisting, bubbling sensation deep in my stomach. Fake or not, prank or not, I was not thrilled about the idea of swimming way out into a bottomless pit of water at 3 a.m. Half of my fears were grounded in reality. Practical things like getting bitten by a water moccasin or tangled in some underwater weed. And even though Bo was as timid as Kathy's bike was embarrassing, he had a point about the cramps. What if one of us really did seize up out there in the middle of all that cold, dark water and sink? Sink to the bottom, wherever that was, if the bottom even existed. Jeff brought hot dogs and managed to successfully convince some older guy outside a gas station to buy him a six-pack of beer, his first ever score. Kathy rolled up on Sissy's shit, equipped with swim goggles and a handful of glow sticks. Bo brought as many pool noodles as he could fit in his backpack, just in case someone got a cramp, because of course he did. I brought a couple of airsoft guns, figuring the whole licking thing would be a total bust, and we would need something to do afterward. Although part of me was still deeply nervous about the whole thing, and the airsoft guns felt less like entertainment and more like security blankets. The ride out to the quarry that night was the most fearful one I had experienced up to that point. Most of the time when I snuck out, I left around 11, and at that hour, things were not so bad. Even in a tiny town like Winona, there were still a few house lights on at 11. You might see the blue glow of a television flickering in someone's living room, or a porch light left on, or the headlights of a car passing through on its way somewhere else. These small signs of life made the ride feel manageable. That night, I set off around 1:30 in the morning because Jeff had insisted we be in the water by 3, the witching hour, because, of course, Jeff had to make it as dramatic as possible. At 1:30, there was nothing awake in Winona. Every house was dark. Every window was black. No passing cars, no porch lights, no television glow. The town looked dead, and riding through it felt like moving through a place that had been abandoned years ago. Kathy, Bo, and Jeff all lived on the other side of town and usually biked to the quarry together when they could. I had no such luxury. I was completely on my own for all 8 miles, pedaling through that absolute darkness with nothing but the sound of my own breathing and the soft rubber hum of my tires on the road. Once the last scattered houses of Winona fell away behind me and I crossed into the forest, I felt millions of eyes on me. It was the same feeling I got when I dove deep into the quarry, that sensation of being watched by something vast and unseen. Except now it was everywhere, above me, beside me, behind me, in every direction. It was a physical feeling, too, not just paranoia. A tingling, burning sensation on the back of my head and neck, like something was breathing on me from inches away. And the strangest thing of all was that the forest was completely silent that night. Usually the woods were alive after dark, a deafening opera of insects buzzing and chirping, owls hooting from high branches, maybe a wailing pack of coyotes howling way out in the deep timber. That night, nothing, not a single insect, not a single owl, not a single rustle of leaves from any living creature. The only sound was the rhythmic turning of my wheels on the dirt. It was as if the entire world around me was lying in wait, holding its breath, watching something unfold that I was not yet aware of. Kathy cracked the glow sticks when we all arrived, and a bright green light slowly spread across our young faces. We looked like little ghosts standing at the edge of the quarry, our skin tinted green, our eyes wide. The water was perfectly still, not a ripple, not a wave, nothing. It sat in its massive stone basin like a sheet of black glass, and it almost felt like it had a kind of pull on me. I could not keep my eyes off of it. Something about the stillness of it, the way it just sat there absorbing the faint green light without giving any of it back, made me feel like it was waiting for us. It was still silent all around, and nobody else seemed to notice the absence of sound. I chose to keep it to myself so I would not freak anyone out more than they might already be. Light gusts of wind swayed the tall trees above us, and the only natural sound was the quiet, unsettling slap of the quarry's water against the rocks at its edge. That, and whatever noise we made ourselves. "I'll lead the way, guys," Jeff said as he struggled to pull his shirt over his head. "Do you want a skinny noodle? Or the fatter kind?" Bo asked, holding up his collection. You can swim faster with the skinny ones, but you'll float a lot better with the fat. I don't want a pool noodle, Bo, Jeff snapped. I'm not 5 years old. Do I look... Okay, look, just drop the noodle thing, man. They'll probably just complicate things, I added calmly, trying to play the peacemaker for once. Your funeral, Bo muttered, and quietly pulled out a skinny pool noodle for himself. I'll have a skinny one, Kathy said in a small voice. Bo's face lit up with vindication, and Jeff's twisted into disgust. Chicken shits, Jeff muttered. The insult was still echoing off the invisible cliffs across the dark water when Jeff jumped in. The splash was sudden and violent and felt almost rude in that heavy silence. It rang out across the quarry and bounced back at us from the far walls, the sound repeating and fading like something that did not want to die. I watched Jeff paddling around in that water, and I felt deep, gut-level dread. Around him was a small, glowing perimeter of green from the glow stick he held above his head, and beyond that circle of light was pure and total darkness. He was floating on the surface of something that went down farther than any of us could imagine, and the thin green glow only made the surrounding black look deeper. A strong wave of nausea rolled through me, and in that moment, I swear, I felt older, like I had aged 5 years in the span of a single breath. Something in my gut was screaming at me, louder than any voice I had ever heard, telling me not to get in that water. In that brief moment, standing at the edge with the cold air on my face and the silence pressing in from all sides, I decided I was not getting in. Something was wrong. The silence, the stillness, the strange pull of the water. It was all wrong. The whole world seemed to know it. Even the bugs knew it. That is when Kathy pushed me in. The world went pitch black. Muffled sounds of laughter came from somewhere far above me, distant and warped like I was hearing them through a wall. Water rushed into my ears, swishing and bubbling and roaring. Cold hit me from every direction at once, thousands of tiny daggers needling every part of my skin. It took a couple of seconds that felt like lifetimes before I gathered that I was now underwater in the quarry, exactly where I had just decided I did not want to be. It was so dark beneath the surface that I could not even see my own feet. I could see a few inches ahead of me, maybe, just the faintest green tint from a glow stick somewhere above. And beyond that was the biggest, most expansive feeling of nothing I had ever experienced. Below me was not just dark water. It was an absence, a void. It felt like I existed in a time before creation, floating in some formless space where nothing had been made yet, and nothing ever would be. I kicked hard and floated back to the surface, and just like that, I was a teenager again, gasping for air in a quarry, with my friends laughing their heads off around me. Kathy, Bo, and Jeff were all howling. "I'm sorry," Kathy said through gasps of laughter. "You were just standing there, all zoned out. I had to." "You flopped so hard, dude. Oh my God," Jeff said, swimming over to hand me a glow stick. I remember feeling embarrassed enough to snap out of whatever existential crisis I had been having before I got pushed in. I told myself to stop being weird and just focus on being young and stupid. The water was just water. It was the same quarry at night as it was during the day. There was nothing down there. There was nothing to be afraid of. The last one to get in the water was Bo, naturally. I was even begging him to jump in, which was ironic given that I had been dead set against getting in myself just moments before. Bo did not jump. Instead, he sat on the ledge with his pool noodle across his lap and slowly scooted himself off the edge, lowering into the water inch by inch like an old man getting into a bath. "It's so cold tonight," Bo stuttered through chattering teeth. "Yeah, it's a real ball shrinker," I said. "You, shut up," Kathy screamed. Don't worry, Cat. He doesn't have any balls, Jeff said. Come on, guys, we got to get moving. The swim out to the center of the quarry probably would not have taken too long if any of us were actual swimmers. But we were four lazy teenagers who had no interest in sports or physical exertion of any kind. Jeff was the most athletic of the group, but only because his genetics had done most of the work for him. It took about 10 or 15 minutes of pathetic butterfly strokes and sloppy doggy paddling before we all agreed that we were roughly in the center of the quarry, or at least as close to the center as we could estimate given how little we could see. "I think this will do," Jeff wheezed, treading water and looking around. "I really thought I was cramping there for a second," Bo said, clutching his pool noodle. "I will drown you if you say the word cramp one more time, bro." "So what do we do now?" I asked. The unease was creeping back in. Between our words, the silence was so thick and heavy it felt like a physical weight pressing against my eardrums. Only the smallest, most subtle little sounds of water lapping against itself could be heard. "I don't know. We wait, I guess." "Like Terry said," Jeff muttered, waving his glow stick around in a slow circle. "How long?" "I'm kind of freaked out," Bo whimpered, gripping his noodle tighter. "Me too." "The water's so deep and cold," Kathy agreed, her voice small. "That's the fun," Jeff sang in a strange voice. "The licking thing won't be long now." "You, quit it, Jeff. I don't like that voice," Kathy said. "What if it's like a big snake that lives in the quarry?" Jeff continued, clearly enjoying himself. "Or maybe, just maybe." "Jeff!" Kathy yelped, and the echo of her shout bounced off the cliff walls and came back to us twice, each time softer and more distorted. "Maybe it's the ghost of a girl who drowned here," Jeff went on. He held the glow stick right under his face, so the green light cast deep shadows upward, making him look like a grotesque impersonation of himself. "And this ghost girl has a curious tongue." Jeff let the silence sit for a beat, his grin spreading wide. Then he slowly looked down into the black water beneath him. "Oh my God!" Jeff screamed as loud as his lungs would allow. We all lost it. Every ounce of composure we had been clinging to shattered in an instant. The water around us erupted into violent splashing as we thrashed and kicked and flailed. All of the dread I'd been carrying the entire night boiled over and flooded through me, and I was filled with a fear so raw and primal it did not even feel human. It felt animal. It felt like something coded into my blood from a million years ago. Glow sticks went flying out of our hands. Water sprayed in every direction. "Guys!" Jeff shouted. "Calm down! Oh my God!" I caught on quicker than Kathy and Bo, who were still a tangle of kicking arms and legs, gasping and screaming. "It was a joke," Jeff said through hysterical laughter. "I didn't see anything. It was a joke." I grabbed Kathy's arm and tried to calm her down. When she finally settled, she turned and did the same for Bo, holding his shoulders and telling him to breathe. I was furious. "What the hell, Jeff?" I growled. "You absolute jackass." "It was a joke, bro. Chill," Jeff said, still giggling in that infuriating way of his. "Yeah, real funny. Your stupid joke just cost us all our glow sticks." Jeff looked at me, confused. Then he looked down into the water. All four of our green glow sticks were sinking. We watched them fall in slow motion, 4 small points of green light tumbling through the dark water, shrinking as they dropped deeper and deeper. They looked like dying stars falling into a black sky turned upside down. We watched them fade, growing dimmer and smaller, and not one of them reached the bottom of the quarry. They just disappeared. The same way the coins always had, swallowed by whatever waited below. "You are such an idiot, Jeff," Kathy said, her voice dripping with acid. "Oh my God," Bo gasped. How are we going to get back? We'll be okay, I said, even though I had no idea if that was true. We're surrounded by land, right? We'll be fine no matter which way we swim. I was talking out of my neck. It was technically true that the quarry was landlocked, but it was also probably at least a mile or two long and just as wide in some places. And almost the entire north side was lined with steep cliffs that would be impossible to climb out of in the dark. I did not have much faith in Bo and Kathy noodling their way across those distances in the cold, black water. And Jeff and I were not much better off. Aimless swimming in pitch darkness with no sense of direction was a recipe for exhaustion and cramps, and exactly the kind of disaster Bo had been warning us about from the start. It was absolutely pitch black now. The faint glow of the sticks was gone, and overcast skies had rolled in while we were swimming, eating up whatever natural starlight might have helped us. The only visual I can recall was the faintest distinction between ground and sky, with the low-hanging clouds taking on an off-black shade, while the quarry and the surrounding forest sat in a void-like darkness so complete you could not see your own hand in the front of your face. We floated there for a while, none of us sure what to do next. The silence had become deafening, and we let it intrude to the point where it seemed like we were all afraid of breaking it. Like speaking would somehow make things worse. Like the silence itself was a living thing that we did not want to disturb. The next thing I remember was a feeling that something in the water had changed. The temperature dropped another degree, and then there was this sensation of movement beneath us. Not waves, not a current from the wind. Something else. Something that felt like a massive body shifting in the deep, displacing water as it moved. The silence was shattered when, out of the darkness in front of me, Kathy screamed. "There's something in here with us," she screeched, her voice raw and cracking. "Kathy, you scared me," Jeff screamed back. "It's under us." Kathy kept going, her voice climbing higher with each word. "It's under us. It's under us. Kathy, hey!" I tried to reach her, tried to snap her out of it. "It's okay. You're okay," Kathy screamed again, and this time there was no uncertainty in the sound. It was pure terror. The kind of scream that comes from somewhere deep in the body that you did not know existed until the moment you need it. It was the worst sound I had ever heard come from a human being. "It's licking me," she shrieked. She thrashed in the water, but I could not see her. I could only feel the resulting waves from her, flailing, and the spits of frigid water that whipped against my face and arms. She is just imagining things, I told myself. There is no way there is something actually licking her. We are all just scared and paranoid, and our minds are playing tricks on us in the dark. "Calm down, Kat. You're fine. You're all good," Jeff shouted. "Screw this. I'm out of here," Bo said, and immediately I heard the frantic rhythm of swimming strokes heading away from us. "Bo," I yelled after him. "We have to stick together, man." We are all just paranoid, I kept telling myself. That is the real danger here. Paranoia, not something in the water. We are stupid and scared, and this is how kids drown. We need to calm down. Everyone needs to calm down right now. A few seconds passed, where it was just Kathy hyperventilating, and the distant sound of Bo fleeing, his strokes getting fainter as he swam further away into the unknowable dark. I noticed that Jeff was not saying anything anymore, which struck me as deeply strange. Jeff always had something to say. Jeff never shut up. Even when he was scared, he hid it behind jokes and insults. The fact that he was silent now frightened me more than anything else. "Jeff, where are you?" I asked the void around me. I could hear Kathy flailing and grunting, still somewhere nearby. Bo was panting in the distance, his strokes getting thinner and thinner. But nothing from Jeff. "Jeff, you chicken shit, where are you?" I shouted, knowing those two words would get a response out of him if anything could. "I feel it too," a voice said from the dark somewhere to my right. It was Jeff, but it did not sound like Jeff. The voice was soft and flat and monotone, stripped of all his usual bravado. "I feel it. It's licking my feet. Jeff, you're being crazy, man. We're all just scared," I said, and I had no confidence whatsoever in my own words. Bo must have been half a football field away by now. His strokes were just faint slaps somewhere off in the distance. "Please make it stop," Kathy whined in an awful, cracking voice that sent a full body shiver through me. It sounded like she was right next to me, close enough to touch, but I could not see her at all. "I hate it. I hate it. I hate it so much." "Just try not to move," Jeff said in that same strange, flat tone. "I don't know. Just stay put, Kat. It'll be okay." Fear devoured me. This was real. Jeff was talking in a way I had never heard before and had no more insults to throw around. Kathy was in some kind of frozen shock and was just letting out these horrible, rattling breaths. This was not a prank. This was not paranoia. This was real. I kept floating there, trying to make myself invisible. I could not see anything at all, so how could anything else possibly see me? It was so unbelievably dark, and I was so cold, and I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, and I was telling myself over and over, just don't move, don't move, don't move. Maybe it will pass, maybe it will leave. That is when the hot, fleshy thing made contact with the bottoms of my feet. The licking thing licked and licked and licked. At first I gasped, a sharp, involuntary intake of breath that I could not control. But then I fell into a similarly frozen state as Kathy, my body locking up, my mind going blank and then filling with a single, blaring note of terror that drowned out everything else. It felt colossal, whatever it was. I do not have the right words for it, and I am not sure the right words exist. Imagine if you flipped a whale inside out, and it pressed its raw, wet, warm mass against the bottoms of your feet and slowly dragged itself across them. Over and over, long, methodical passes of something enormous moving beneath us in the deep. But the strangest part, the part that still keeps me up at night, was how gentle it was. Whatever this thing was, it was being careful, deliberate. It was not trying to drag us down or hurt us. It was tasting, sampling. Each pass of that massive, hot, slick surface across my skin felt intentional and measured, like a tongue running across a new flavor, trying to understand it. I prayed. I had never been religious. My family did not go to church. I did not know any prayers by heart. I did not even know if I believed in God. But I prayed regardless, with every fiber of my being in the most desperate and clumsy way possible. Oh God, please do not let me die right here. Oh God, please just give me a heart attack or cancer later on. I do not care. Just not this. Not here. Not now. Not this way. Please, God. Please. 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 It must have been several long and silent minutes of the licking thing's tasting before the heat of it faded away from the soles of my feet and that unfathomable sensation stopped. The warmth pulled back down into the deep, and the water around me went cold again, normal cold, the kind of cold that was just water being water. The thing was gone. I could feel the absence of it. It was still pitch black and silent. Bo had either swum so far away that he was beyond hearing, made it to shore, or drowned. Kathy and Jeff were not making any sounds either. For a horrible stretch of time, I feared that they had both been taken by the licking thing while I was frozen in my own private horror. That the tasting had been the prelude to something else, and I had simply been the one it chose to leave behind. It took a lot of courage to speak after all of that. My jaw was shaking so hard my teeth clicked together. "Guys," I whispered into the dark. "Are you guys still here?" Silence. To my left, a tiny wave of water sloshed against me. Maybe an aftershock of Beau's retreat. Or maybe a remnant of whatever had just been beneath us, gliding back down into the deep. "Guys!" I whispered louder, as loud as I dared. "I'm here," Jeff said. His voice was thin and hollow. "We need to leave," Kathy said through sobs. "Please, we need to go. Right now." "What if it comes for us when we start swimming?" I asked. "I think it's gone," Jeff said. "I don't feel the heat anymore." "Me neither, so can we go already?" Kathy begged. "Let's just start slow," I suggested. Really, really slow, until we're far enough away. With the caution of hunted prey, the three of us began to swim, slow, deliberate strokes. No splashing, no kicking. Just the quietest, most careful movement through the water we could manage, as if the licking thing was sleeping somewhere below us, and we did not want to wake it. I have always had a decent sense of direction, and I will forever be grateful for that ability. That subtle internal compass, that quiet tug in my mind that always told me where I was in relation to somewhere else, is what got us back to shore that night. It took a little longer than the swim out, but we only ended up a couple 100 feet from where we had left our things, which felt like a miracle. Beau had more trouble. He had gone north in his panic and hit the cliffs, and then had to swim all the way back across the quarry to reach us. We had to build a fire on the shore to guide him, and luckily he saw the glow from across the water. That fire was something we should have started from the very beginning, before we ever got in the water, but you do not think ahead when you are young and believe you are untouchable. Kathy, Jeff, and I had all learned that night that we were very touchable, vulnerable, edible. When Beau finally climbed out of the quarry, shaking and dripping, he found 3 petrified husks of his friends sitting around the fire, chugging beers and eating cold, bunless hot dogs. We did not even look up when he approached. We were all somewhere else, lost deep inside our own heads, replaying what had happened and trying to make it fit into a world that made sense. Only one thing was on our minds. I will always remember my first beer. It came in a blue can. It tasted like warm, metallic piss, and I could not drink it fast enough. Beau was a mess of complaints when he sat down. He had scrapes and cuts and bruises all over his arms and legs from hitting the cliffs. He was freezing and had turned pruny from all his time in the water. He was miserable and wanted us to know about every single discomfort. We could offer no help. We were hollowed out. "Did you feel it?" Jeff finally asked Beau. His voice was flat. "Feel what?" "Never mind." Beau almost pressed further. I could see it in his eyes, that flicker of curiosity mixed with something that might have been understanding. Maybe he sensed from the way we were sitting, from the way none of us could look at the water, that something had happened out there that he had been lucky enough to miss. He sat down by the fire and warmed his hands and his pruned feet. He did not ask for a beer. He did not ask for a hot dog. He just sat there quietly. And for once in his life, Beau did not try to start a conversation. Eventually, the sun came crawling up over the horizon. The quarry caught the first light and reflected it in brilliant reds and oranges that should have been beautiful, but to me looked only like blood. A massive body of blood sitting in the earth before us, glowing with the dawn. We hiked out of there in silence. Nobody talked. Beau tried a few times to start a conversation, asking about plans for later, asking if anyone wanted to come over to his house, asking if we should ride together on the way back. No conversations were started despite his efforts. Something in us had changed. Something had snapped or shifted or died. Kathy, Jeff, and I were different people on that trail than the ones who had biked out to the quarry the night before. And we would stay different. Kathy ripped Sissy's shit out of a thorn bush without a word and rode off down the trail. No goodbye, no wave, no see you later. Just the squeak of those rusty pedals fading into the morning. Jeff hopped on Terry's green Schwinn and pedaled off fast. He gave us a couple of short nods, the kind that are more like punctuation marks than actual communication. And then he was gone. I watched him fly down the road and thought that Terry better find somewhere to hide before Jeff got home, because the look on Jeff's face was something beyond anger. It was the look of someone who had been fundamentally betrayed. Bo gave me a fist bump and climbed onto his BMX bike. "I'll see you guys tomorrow," he asked. I looked at Bo with my new eyes, the ones the licking thing had given me, and I lied. "Yeah, man, see you then." "So much for the licking thing, right?" Bo said with a small smile. Still, it was a fun night, even though I was lost at sea for half of it. He shook his head, still smiling, and rode his BMX down the street with his knees sticking out to the sides like he was riding a tricycle. I watched them all disappear around the first curve on the road back into Winona. The morning light was gold and soft, and the birds were singing now. The insects were buzzing. The forest was alive again, as if nothing had ever been wrong. As if the silence of the previous night had been a dream. I felt the urge to cry, a hot pressure building behind my eyes and in my throat. But I did not let it out. I just let it all sit right below the surface, where it would stay for years. I picked up my fallen Huffy and looked at the faded orange flames painted on its frame. They looked so childish to me now, so small and silly and far away, like something that belonged to a kid I used to know but could barely remember. I started pedaling back toward Winona. The bike bucked and stuttered for the first few yards the way it always did, jerking beneath me like it was trying to throw me off until I built up enough speed and all of its injuries smoothed out into that familiar, steady momentum. That was the last time I ever talked to any of my best friends. The licking thing had changed us, all three of us who felt it. It jaded us into some new chapter of our lives where we were no longer compatible with one another. It was not that we hated each other or had any kind of falling out. It was more like we had each been cracked open by the same experience, and what spilled out of each of us was too private and too strange to share. We could not look at each other without remembering, and remembering was unbearable. So we just stopped. We drifted apart, the way a broken plate separates into pieces that will never fit back together, no matter how carefully you try. While I do not wish to physically harm Terry, the way Jeff might have wanted to on that morning after our encounter, I certainly resent him. I resent him for carelessly shattering our innocence and our friendship with a dare he tossed out while stoned around a trash fire. He had no idea what he was handing us. Or maybe he did and just did not care. As I grew older, I came to find out that a lot of teenagers in Winona knew about the licking thing. It was treated as a sort of rite of passage, something you had to go through to prove yourself, to become a real badass in the eyes of your peers. Some kids stumbled upon it by accident, swimming out too far on a warm night and feeling that impossible warmth rise from below. Others were like us, dragged into it by some older sibling or a friend with higher social status who dared them to go out into the black water and wait. It was just something to do in our little town. Hardly any questions were ever asked about what the licking thing actually was. Adults either had no idea it existed or dismissed it as a tall tale. A campfire story that kids told each other to feel brave. The whole culture around it never sat right with me. I did my best over the years to dissuade people from going out to the quarry to meet the licking thing. I would tell younger kids it was not worth it, that it was dangerous, that the quarry was deeper and stranger than they realized. Who knows if my efforts ever made a difference? Probably not. Fear of missing out is the real monster, after all. When everyone else has done it and lived to talk about it, you start to feel like a coward for not doing it yourself. You start to feel like chicken shit. And those two words, as I learned that summer, are enough to make a person do just about anything. It has been around 13 years since I met the licking thing, and I still feel it. On some nights, lying in bed in the dark, I will feel that warm, wet, impossibly large presence glide across the bottoms of my feet, slow and deliberate, the same way it felt in the quarry. The same methodical passes, the same gentle, curious pressure. I will lie there rigid and breathless, gripping the sheets, staring at the ceiling, telling myself it is just a memory, just my nerves replaying an old recording, just my brain refusing to let go of something it cannot explain. But it feels so real. The warmth, the texture, the weight of something massive and alive just beneath the surface of wherever I am. Swimming out into that water is still one of my biggest regrets. I think about it more than I should. I think about Kathy and whether she ever stopped flinching at the feeling of water on her skin. I think about Jeff and whether his anger ever cooled or whether it just turned inward and ate him alive. I think about Bo, sweet, clueless Bo, who swam away before the licking thing could reach him and never knew what the rest of us went through. I wonder if he is happier for it. I wonder if ignorance really is the mercy people say it is. Even though I now live hundreds of miles away in a big city with new friends who have never heard of Winona, even though I have a busy job and expensive hobbies and there have been thousands of days between that night and this one, I still feel like the licking thing knows where I am. I still feel like it has not forgotten the taste of me. Like something that old and that patient does not need to chase. It just waits. It has been waiting in that quarry since before Winona existed, since before anyone put a name to the land, and it will be waiting long after every house in that little town has rotted into the ground and the forest has swallowed the roads. Or worse, and this is the thought that truly keeps me awake, maybe one day I will not be running from it anymore. Maybe one day I will wake up and feel that familiar pull, that quiet magnetic tug that the quarry always had on me. And I will get in my car and drive back to Winona. I will park at the edge of the forest and walk the old trail and stand at the rim of that ancient hole in the earth and look down at that still, dark, knowing water. And I will go in, not because something drags me, not because I am forced, but because some part of me, the part that was tasted and sampled and marked 13 years ago, has always belonged to it. And the licking thing has simply been waiting for me to realize it. Story 4. I was walking to the subway station. It was raining, which nobody had mentioned on the Weather Channel that morning, so I had grabbed a newspaper from a stand without paying for it and plastered it over my head like a makeshift umbrella. I looked down toward the wet pavement and away from the onslaught of rain so that my glasses would stay dry. This did not work at all. The water was sliding down my forehead in little rivers and dripping off my cheeks and running right down the lenses anyway. Everything in front of me was a blur of gray and wet concrete. There was a jingling sound. Rattle, rattle. Several coins bounced around inside a paper cup somewhere to my left. I did not look up. I just patted my pants pocket with my free hand as if to say, I have nothing for you. Sorry. And I kept moving. I kept my head down and my feet splashing through the puddles, and I tried to walk past him the way you walk past every other person holding a cup on the sidewalk in the city. You have got $8.75, the man shouted. His voice boomed above the sound of the downpour, cutting right through the noise of the rain and the traffic and the wind like it was nothing. I stopped walking. He was right. I had exactly that. That is twice the subway fare, I thought to myself. 4 loonies and a quarter, multiplied by 2 trips, 1 there and 1 back. It was a smart trick, I figured. A good way to get someone to stop and pay attention. But I wondered how he knew I was carrying that extra quarter. I had brought it specifically for the shopping cart at the supermarket where I planned to stop after work. It was not subway money. It was grocery money. How could he have possibly known that? You have something for me, he said. His voice had changed. It was softer now, almost a coo, like the way you might talk to a small animal you were trying to lure closer. His little trick with the money had worked. It had stopped me dead in my tracks, and now, while I was standing still trying to figure out how he had done it, he stepped right in front of me and blocked my path. I got my first real look at him then. His grin showed his teeth, and they were awful. They were like a horse's teeth, yellowed and oversized and jutting outward from his gums at odd angles. He had a nose like an eagle's beak, curved and sloped downward into a drooping point that hung over his upper lip. His ears stuck out from the sides of his head and sagged like a cow's ears, floppy and low and wrong-looking on a human face. His long neck arched forward like a swan's, bending at an angle that made it look like his head was always leaning toward you, even when he was standing still. He had flaming orange hair, bright and wild, but where the rain had soaked through it, the color had faded into a murky copper that clung to his scalp in wet clumps. He was a very ugly man. I do not say that to be cruel. It is simply what he was. I am sorry. I need it, I said. I was talking about my money. I peered at him from above the frames of my glasses, looking over the top of them the way you do when you want to see someone clearly, but do not want to fully commit to making eye contact. My eyes were cautious and guarded, and I tried very hard not to show my frustration. The newspaper above my head flapped angrily as the wind picked up speed, threatening to tear it right out of my hand. I moved to continue on my path, and the sole of my rubber boot came down hard in a cloudy puddle with a loud splash. I have got something for you. I paused again. His smile was wider now, toothier, and the golden caps that decorated his back molars peeked out from around the corners of his upturned mouth, glinting dully in the gray light. He spun around with a strange, almost theatrical flourish and stooped down to his sleeping place on the sidewalk. His bed was a blanket that had been soaked through by the rain and bleached pale by years of sun. On it there was a scattering of items, sodden strips of cardboard with writing too faded to read, a dirty yellow bucket that was filled almost to the brim with rainwater, an assortment of pens and pencils and markers, some with caps and some without, scattered across the fabric like pickup sticks, a folded gray jumper that served as a pillow, flattened down to almost nothing from years of use. And there was one more thing, a large box made of wood, sitting right in the middle of everything like it was the centerpiece of some strange little display. He scooped it up with both hands and thrust the heavy trunk into my chest before I could say a word. It hit me with enough force to push me back half a step, and the weight of it surprised me. It was heavier than it looked. Not wanting it to crash down onto my flimsy shoes if he suddenly let go, I gripped it firmly with both hands and pulled it against my body. The moment my hands left the newspaper, the wind snatched it away. I watched it get ripped into the air by the storm, thrashing and spinning wildly, flashing the words Toronto Star at me one last time before it disappeared behind the curtain of fog and rain. Do not look inside. Keep the lid shut. I do not want this. I cannot take it on the train, I stammered. And I looked up toward him to hand it back, but he was not there. He was gone. My head swiveled left and right, scanning the sidewalk in both directions, but I could not spot him anywhere. The rain was coming down so hard now that everything more than 20 feet away was just a gray blur. I could not see him, but I could feel him. I could feel that the ugly man's gaze was still on me, his figure hidden somewhere behind the sheet of falling water, watching me from a place I could not reach. My glasses were completely useless, the lenses streaked and smeared with rain, and I could barely see 3 feet in front of my face. A thunderclap cracked through the sky so loud it felt like the sound had come from inside my own chest, and a bolt of lightning lit up the entire street in a flash of white. I broke out in a run for the metro without another word, the box clutched tight against me. I was at the turnstile. I tried to fish the fare out of my pocket, digging my fingers down past the fabric to get at the coins, but I could not reach them. My hands were full with the box. I could not hold it with one arm because it was too heavy and too awkward, and I could not set it down on the wet floor because I did not want to. A curt hello attracted the attention of the ticket inspector sitting in his little booth, and I passed the chest over to him, placing it carefully in his hands so that I could free mine up to slot the change into the machine. Clink, clink. The turnstile's gate opened with a mechanical click. For a moment, a few seconds at least, I thought about leaving the box with the attendant, just walking away and letting it be his problem. The wet trunk had already begun to soak through his crisp white shirt sleeves, spreading dark patches of moisture across the fabric. He was gazing at it intently, his face revealing a mixture of confusion and genuine interest. He turned it over slowly in his hands. He was inspecting it in much more depth than I had bothered to, running his fingers along the edges and examining the hardware on the lid. And watching him do that made me suddenly curious about it myself. What was he seeing that I had missed? What was so interesting about this box? I snatched it back from him before he could look any closer. I stepped onto the platform and did not meet his eye as he watched me walk away. Now, while I was sitting on the train, I tried not to stare at the big, cumbersome thing resting on my lap. I told myself that the less attention it received from me, the less it would receive from the other nosy commuters sharing the car. I glanced around at the weary expressions worn by the rest of the passengers, their tired faces and drooping eyelids explained by a quick check of my digital watch. It was 7:34 in the morning, early enough that nobody wanted to be awake, let alone crammed into a metal tube underground with a bunch of strangers. But some of their tired eyes twitched toward my box, little sideways glances, the kind people try to hide by pretending to look at something just past you. My head had begun to ache. I realized I was clenching my jaw so hard that my teeth were grinding together. I watched the dreary cityscape slide past the window as the train surfaced above ground. The wet glass concealed the finer details of everything outside, but I was familiar enough with the view that I could fill in the gaps. This was my usual route, after all. Slick gray concrete littered with colorful graffiti filled the foreground, splashes of neon against the dull urban canvas. Mirrored high-rises spiraled upward toward plump, rain-filled clouds, and their glass surfaces echoed the harsh gray of the overcast sky, reflecting nothing but more gray back down at the city below. Lake Ontario could be glimpsed through a gap in the buildings where a crumbling brick wall had been hastily replaced with a chain link fence. Without the sun to illuminate its rippling waters, the Great Lake resembled nothing more than a giant slab of smooth, dark stone stretching out to the horizon. The window was consumed by darkness as the subway dipped back beneath the street, and suddenly the glass became a mirror. Reflected in the black surface was me, sitting there soaking wet with a box on my lap, and right next to me, the man who had silently taken his place in the seat beside me without me noticing. "I will take that from you," he said. His voice was a low grumble, deep and thick, and it vibrated in his chest like the rumble of a diesel engine. He was a large man. His hulking figure occupied 1.5 seats easily, his broad shoulders and wide frame spilling over the armrest and into my space. Though there was an empty seat to his right, his bulk encroached upon me from the left, pressing against my arm and my hip. He dwarfed me in height. Where I was a measly 5 feet and 4 inches, his sturdy frame surely exceeded 6 feet. And even sitting down, he loomed over me like a wall. I tore my eyes away from his reflection in the window and did not look at him directly. I shook my head no. "Please?" He stretched a thick, meaty hand toward the box, his sausage fingers reaching out and caressing the damp wood almost tenderly, like he was petting an animal. I slapped his hand away hard. "Mine." As he recoiled, pulling his hand back and rubbing the spot where I had struck him, I rose from the bench and clutched the box against my chest. The metal doors of the train creaked open shortly after I stood, and I scurried off onto the platform several stops before my own to get away from the would-be thief. I did not look back to see if he followed me. I walked the rest of the way to work, 1/2 of a mile through the city, pelted the entire time by the steady, relentless downpour. My rubber boots squelched loudly on the elevator's carpeted floor when I finally stepped inside the building. Drip, drip. Water slid off of my drenched suit jacket in thin streams and trickled down onto the rug, forming a small puddle around my feet almost immediately. I pressed the button for the 9th floor with my elbow, since both of my hands were occupied holding the box. I had a meeting that morning, some kind of hubbub about an upcoming project that I had barely read the email about, but I wanted to visit my office first. I wanted to put the box somewhere safe. Numbers flashed on the small red display above the door as the elevator rose slowly. 1, 2, 3. And then the elevator stopped and the door slid open. There was a scoff. "Gee, look at you," Deuce said. He lifted his arm to his face, covering his mouth with the back of his hand, and disguised his mocking laughter as a cough that was not fooling anybody. I could not stand Deuce. I had never been able to stand Deuce. I did not offer any pleasantries in response. He gripped his leather suitcase firmly and entered the elevator without another word, though I could see the edge of his lips tightening into that familiar little smirk he always wore when he thought he was better than someone. His boss, Helen, stood behind him in the hallway. Her gaze was fixed on the back of his head, a clear scowl forming on her face, and I could tell she did not care for him much either. She noticed me and gave a small nod in greeting. I nodded back. The elevator began to climb again. 6 more floors until mine, but just 2 floors had passed when I began to feel deeply uneasy. Deuce and Helen's eyes were on me. I could feel their stares without even turning around. On me, and more specifically, on my box. I squeezed the chest so tightly that a wooden splinter from its rough edge lodged itself deep into my pointer finger. It burned red and painful, and I winced, but I did not let go. To protect myself, and more importantly, to protect my box, I turned my body around to face the corner of the elevator. I tucked my head down and hunched over the trunk, curling my body around it like a shell. I stared at the blank metal panels that decorated the elevator walls and the thin black seam between them where they met in the corner. Behind me, the two of them shifted. I could hear them shuffle their feet on the carpet, and I knew their heads had turned to look at me, but I shielded the box with my shivering, rain-soaked body, and I did not move. 6, 7, 8, 9. The door opened, and I sprinted into my office without looking back. I locked the door behind me. I pulled the blinds on the interior window shut, so nobody walking through the hallway could see inside. I turned the lights off. I crossed the room and closed the curtains on the window that overlooked the city, blocking out the gray daylight and the rain-streaked skyline. The room was dim now, almost dark, and it felt safer that way. I sat down at my desk, the old chair groaning beneath the combined weight of me and the box, and for the first time since the ugly man had shoved it into my chest, I really looked at it. It was wood, yes, but what kind of wood I could not say. The rain had changed the color and texture of the grain, darkening it unevenly and swelling the fibers so that the surface felt rough and soft at the same time. There were 2 leather straps with brass buckles that secured the lid, one on each side, pulled tight and fastened down. The edges of the leather were worn and faded, and the uncured hide beneath the finish was visible through the cracks where the material had dried out and split over time. There were 2 zip ties as well, made of ribbed white plastic, threaded through metal loops on the front of the box and pulled tight. There were many elastic bands wrapped around the box, far more than seemed necessary. 100 or more thin strips of tan rubber stretched and layered over each other until they formed a dense web that covered nearly every surface, and there was a very, very small lock on the box's golden clasp. It was no bigger than the tip of my pinky finger, almost comically tiny, but it held the clasp firmly shut. This strange gift was a box that I should not open. The ugly man had told me clearly, do not look inside. Keep the lid shut. But what was in there? When I rattled the chest gently, holding it up to my ear and shaking it side to side, there was no sound. It sounded completely empty. Was there nothing inside? Why had the man given it away so eagerly if there was nothing in it? Why had the ticket inspector been so fascinated by it? Why had the large man on the train wanted it so badly? I needed to know. I had to know. What was in this box? I undid the metal fasteners and removed the 2 strips of leather. I turned them over in my hands slowly, running my fingers along the smooth side and on the soft back of each strap, branded into the hide with what must have been a hot iron. There was a single word. The first one read greed. The second one read envy. I stared at them for a long moment, turning the words over in my mind the same way I was turning the leather over in my hands. Then I tossed them into the plastic wastebasket beside my desk. A second later, I reached back in and plucked them out. I opened the locked drawer at the bottom of my desk and stuffed them inside so that nobody else would find them. I picked up a pair of scissors from the cup on my desk and cut through the cable ties. They fell away from the box and landed on the desktop with a soft click. They had text on them, too. Someone had written on each one with black permanent marker in small, careful letters. The first one said hunger. The second one said yearning. I read the words twice, then placed the severed zip ties into the drawer with the leather straps. I used the scissors again on the rubber bands. I could have stretched them off the box one by one, peeling them away carefully and saving them. But I did not want to do that. I needed to know what was inside, and I needed to know right now. I could not wait any longer. I cut through them in bunches, snipping the scissors through thick clusters of rubber, and as each group snapped and broke apart, shrinking back into tiny fragments of curled, stretchy cord, they made a sound. If I were a crazy person, I might say that sound was the word curiosity. But I am not crazy, so it just sounded like elastic bands breaking. I swept their remains off the desk and into the drawer with everything else. Now there was only the lock. That tiny, almost ridiculous little lock on the golden clasp. I straightened out a paperclip from the magnetic holder on my desk and bent the end into a hook. I stuffed it into the keyhole of the tiny lock and wiggled it around. I jammed it in further and twisted. I stabbed at the mechanism wildly, poking and prodding and scraping at the inside of the lock with the bent wire, but it would not open. It did not work. I turned the box onto its side and picked up my metal stapler. It was a heavy industrial one, the kind that could punch through 50 pages at once, and it felt solid and weighty in my hand. I brought it down on the little lock. I slammed it once, hard, then again, then again. I held the lock in place with my left hand, pinching it between my splintered pointer finger and my sweaty thumb, steadying it so I could get a clean hit. I raised the stapler high and brought it down one more time, but my aim was off and I brought it down directly on my thumb. Foolishness, I cursed beneath my breath, shaking my throbbing hand. But the lock had sprung open. The impact, whether on the lock or on my thumb, had done the trick. The tiny mechanism had popped apart, and the clasp was free. I threw the broken lock into the drawer so quickly that it nearly bounced back out, and I slammed the drawer shut. I righted the box and placed both of my hands on the lid. My fingers were trembling. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wrenched the lid apart, and the old hinges squealed in protest, a long, high-pitched creak that echoed through my dark office. I was vibrating with excitement, my teeth chattering, my whole body buzzing with the anticipation of finally seeing what was inside. I leaned forward and peered into the box. There was emptiness. There was certainly nothing at all. The inside of the box was bare wood, unfinished and pale. And there was nothing resting on the bottom. No object, no treasure, no secret. Just empty space and the faint smell of old timber. I reached into the box anyway, thrusting my hand inside and thrashing it around, grasping at the lack of anything, refusing to believe that it could truly be empty after everything I had gone through to open it. My fingers scraped along the bottom and the walls and the underside of the lid, searching desperately for something, anything at all. And then I felt it. There was something. Not an object, but a word. A single word had been carved into the bottom of the box, engraved into the wood with careful, deliberate strokes. I traced each letter slowly with the tip of my finger, feeling the grooves and curves cut into the grain. I searched the four walls and the inside of the lid for more, running my fingers over every inch of the interior. But there was nothing else. Just the one word, alone at the bottom of an empty box. Hope, it said.